The city never slept. Cars roared through the streets, lights flashed from every corner, and people hurried past one another, each chasing something unseen. In the middle of that restless noise lived a girl named Mira. She was 16, quiet, thoughtful, and often lost in her own little world. Her life was ordinary, but inside her heart, storms of silence always moved. Every morning, she walked the same road to school, past the same shops, past the same faces, and every day she felt the same emptiness. In her classroom, laughter echoed. Groups gathered in corners, whispering secrets, showing memes, taking selfies. Mira sat by the window, drawing small shapes in her notebook. No one really noticed her, and somehow that hurt more than being teased. Sometimes she'd force a smile when someone asked for a pencil. Sometimes she'd join the laughter, but her heart stayed quiet, because deep down she knew she didn't belong there. At home, silence continued its rule. Her mother sat in the living room with her laptop, eyes fixed on work meetings, words floating through screens. Her father read the newspaper at the same corner of the couch. They loved her. Mira knew that, but love had turned into routine. Dinner was 3 plates, 3 screens, and no words. Sometimes she tried to speak. "Mom, I drew something today." "That's great, honey," her mother said without looking up. "Dad, I got good marks." "Good," he muttered, still turning a page. The rest was silence. At night, Mira would sit by her window, watching the lights of distant buildings shimmer against the dark sky. She wondered how many people lived inside those glowing rooms. How many felt the same way, surrounded by people, yet completely alone. She whispered softly, "Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I just feel too much." But the wind didn't answer. One Thursday afternoon, something small changed. School ended early, and instead of going straight home, Mira took a wrong turn, or maybe the right one. She walked down a narrow lane she'd never noticed before. The noise of traffic faded behind her, and suddenly the world grew quiet. Ahead stood a small, hidden park, tall trees, an old fountain, and a single empty bench. Sunlight fell through the leaves like liquid gold. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The air smelled of earth and rain. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a distance, but here, under the trees, the silence was soft, like a whisper. Mira sat on the bench and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while she listened, to the wind brushing through branches, to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. And she realized something she'd never noticed before. Silence wasn't empty. It was full of sounds too gentle to be heard by noise. From that day, she began to visit the park every afternoon, sometimes after school, sometimes just before sunset. At first, she didn't know what to do there. She just sat, listening, watching, breathing. But slowly, she began to draw. She sketched the trees, the birds, the ripples in the fountain. Her drawings were clumsy at first, uncertain lines, uneven shading. But as the days passed, the sketches began to glow with life. Each page captured a feeling she couldn't explain in words. Peace, loneliness, stillness, wonder. Weeks passed. Seasons began to shift. The park became her second home, a quiet friend that never interrupted. Mira noticed how the sunlight changed color with time, how leaves fell in spirals, how every evening smelled a little different. She began to see things others missed. A bird's reflection in water, a shadow that looked like wings, a single flower blooming through a crack in stone. It was as if the world was speaking softly to her. And for the first time, she had learned how to listen. But peace is never permanent. One day, while sitting in the park, Mira overheard two girls from her school. They didn't see her behind the tree. "She's always alone," one said. "So weird." "Yeah," the other giggled. "Maybe she doesn't have friends." Mira froze. Their words stung like needles, not because they were wrong, but because part of her still wished for someone to sit beside her. She packed her sketchbook and left quietly. That night, she sat in her room staring at the ceiling. The silence felt heavy again, like it had turned against her. But then her eyes fell on the sketchbook. She opened it slowly, flipping through the pages. Her drawings of sunlight, leaves, water, and wind. And she realized these pages were her friends. They had listened when no one else had. They had captured every emotion she couldn't share. Her sadness turned into a soft smile. Being alone wasn't the problem. Forgetting how to love your own company. That was the real loneliness. The next morning, she went back to the park. This time, she didn't hide behind the trees. She sat proudly on her bench, sketchbook open, eyes calm. She drew not to escape the world, but to connect with it in her own quiet way. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Her art improved, her confidence grew. She started posting her sketches online. At first, no one cared. Then a few people noticed, then dozens, then hundreds. One comment read, "Your drawings feel like peace." Another said, "I can feel the quiet in your art." And one more wrote, "Thank you." I didn't know silence could be beautiful. For the first time, Mira smiled, not out of pride, but out of connection. The world that once ignored her was now listening, not to her words, but to her silence. Months later, she began holding small art classes in the same park. People from nearby neighborhoods joined. Children, elders, students. She taught them not just how to draw, but how to observe, how to breathe, how to listen. "Art isn't about lines," she said once during a class. "It's about noticing what most people overlook." She had learned something powerful, that solitude wasn't a prison, it was a teacher. Years passed. Mira grew older, wiser, stronger. Her art spread across cities, galleries, social media, schools. People said her work felt alive. When asked in interviews what inspired her, she always smiled and said, "Silence. Because silence gave me everything noise couldn't." One spring morning, as golden light filtered through the trees, a young girl from her new art class sat beside her. "Mira," the girl whispered, "do you ever feel lonely?" Mira smiled softly. "Sometimes. But I've learned that loneliness isn't the same as being alone." The girl tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Mira looked at the sunlight shimmering on the fountain and said, "Being alone means you're with yourself. Loneliness means you've forgotten how to love that person." The girl thought for a while. Then she smiled, a small, shy smile. And in that silence, a bond was formed. Mira had once been the quiet one on the bench. Now, she was the reason others found peace. Her art, her words, her presence, they all taught one message, that solitude can be strength, and silence can sing if you listen long enough. That evening, after everyone left, Mira sat alone again on the same old bench, the one that started it all. The sky glowed orange and pink, leaves rustled softly, and she whispered to herself, "I used to fear being alone. Now I cherish it, because being alone helped me find me." She closed her eyes, smiled, and breathed deeply, in rhythm with the quiet heartbeat of the world. Moral of the story: being alone is not emptiness. It's awareness. It's the space where you rediscover who you are. When you stop running from silence, you begin to hear your soul. The art of being alone is learning that peace begins within you. And once you master that art, you'll never truly feel lonely again.